Mercedes-Benz are no strangers to the world of touring car racing. You're likely familiar with the legend that is the 190E. Beautiful slow motion shots of it racing in all manners of disciplines, from the DTM in Germany to the more accessible Group A in Australia and Europe. It became a common sight on racing circuits across the world. Its successor, the W202, became just as famous a sight in the DTM circuit as the 190. But did you also know that it was destined to join the lineup of British touring car legends? Well, we're about to find out. Before we go any further, full credit goes to 1990's BTCC.com, who brought this story to the public eye recently and made me want to do a video on it, so go check them out. The 190E, sometimes called the Baby Benz, was genuinely the car that saved Mercedes. With a gap in the market and increasingly good competition, Mercedes needed a smaller, entry-level executive car. While it led to fears that having a smaller model would dilute the brand, if only they knew what would happen 20 years later, the 190E was an absolute sensation. Mercedes couldn't build them quick enough, and with a design so revolutionary and iconic, they even decided to essentially just Ctrl-T scale it up for the bigger E-Class that will come shortly after, the W204. Mercedes had big motorsports plans for the 190E, with everything from Group B rally to one make races planned, but where it really found its footing was in the DTM, or the Deutsche Touring Meisterschaft. I've definitely butchered that pronunciation. Now, you've seen these shots of the 190E a million times, so there's no need to flog a very successful horse. But lesser talked about is the lower down models, the Group A models. Less flamboyant and much more strictly regulated, the Group A 190E models were fairly successful across the world stage, and a few times the Group A 190s found themselves racing on some British circuits as part of the European Touring Car Championship. Now, you're probably wondering what the relevance of all this is, and trust me, there is a point to it. The point being that the world stage never included the BTCC, the British Touring Car Championship. Okay, pedantic point, the 190 did race in the BTCC's predecessor, the British Saloon Car Championship, but that's not the same thing. The British Touring Car Championship, as the name pretty much spot on sums up, was and is the UK's premier road-based racing series. At its absolute peak, known as the Super Touring era, the racing that was on display was nothing short of breathtaking. Some of the most iconic moments in racing history took place in the BTCC, with legends like the Audi A4, Peugeot 406 and my personal favourite, the Renault Laguna, being transformed from run-of-the-mill executive saloons to fire-breathing monsters. The series became immortalised when it was the basis for a stellar racing game series, Top of Touring Cars, which would eventually go on to become the Grid series as we know it today. That was in the late 1990s though, when it was at its peak, but this golden era all began in the early 90s. In 1992, there was a stunning grid of 8 manufacturers all competing: Nissan, Toyota, Ford, Peugeot Talbot, Renault, Mazda, and Mercedes' biggest rival, BMW. But there is one brand missing there, Mercedes themselves. That wasn't the intention, thanks to the car they launched that year and the successor to the 190E, the W202. Starting off the lineage of the C-Class as we know it today, the W202 was the new baby Benz for the 90s. I'll just clear this up for you. So the 190E's chassis code was W201, and the C-Class, the first of, was the W202. So while the 190E isn't called the C-Class because it's a W201 and the first C-Class is W202, people kind of think you get where I'm coming from. Smoother and more rounded than its predecessor and available in some very period correct options, the W202 was living proof that owning the smaller Benz didn't have to mean compromise. But let's be real, you don't give a shit about that, you want to know how they made it fast, and now we enter the C180 DTM. Carrying on from the 190E's torch, C180 was a dominant force to be reckoned with on the circuits. In probably its most iconic guise, the D2 livery, it had a slew of victories and asserted Mercedes' dominance as the kings of the DTM. The thing is though, DTM, that was it. the top tier. Mercedes never homologated the W202 for Group A, BTCC or anything else for that matter. The C180 DTM was all that we got. The 190E got to race in a plethora of events, but the C180 got DTM and nothing more. That wasn't meant to be the case. 1993 was to have an even more stellar lineup in the BTCC, with the inclusion of Mercedes. Well, Mercedes were supposed to enter the BTCC, and had even gone so far as to have a livery and a mock-up. Billed to take part in the tail end of the 93 season for testing and enter in 94 as the full season, the plan was to enter the new W202 as a marketing ploy. I mean, isn't all motorsports really? Much closer to the road car than the DTM monster was, this was much more akin to something you'd see on the street. To be entered by ProDrive, the folks behind legends like many of Subaru's rally cars, the Ferrari 550 race car and many more, it was to be driven by famed racing driver Tim Sugden, who spilled the beans about the Stillborn project in an interview. While ProDrive would be entering it, likely to have a British headquarters nearby, the W202 BTCC would actually go on to be built by AMG in Germany, who at the time were still independent of Mercedes, and would be developed alongside Bernd Schneider, a man whose ties to Mercedes are so strong that he later became a Mercedes brand ambassador, whatever that means. Maybe I'll be one someday, who knows. All we have to go off is literally this image here, likely from an entry form or some promo imagery, and sadly, nothing else. We have no idea of anything more, whether it would be also badged as a C180 or if they go something higher spec to suit British buyers, well, who knows. All we can do is dream and imagine what would have become of it. The battles between it and BMW, and then also Alfa Romeo, in models much closer to the road-going counterparts than in DTM, would have been fantastic. You gotta remember as well, this generation of C-Class never got to take the battle to BMW, as the E36 was never in the DTM. For now though, this little tidbit of Mercedes history fades into obscurity, and we might never know what could have been. I've been Tomo, this is a 427 Motorsports history snippet. Thanks very much for watching, subscribe if you haven't, check out our web store if you'd like to buy some merch, and we'll see you in the next one. Good luck.